This is Take 5 with JK Strategies.
This is Jack Calvertinis. Welcome, friends, to Take 5, where we get a chance to sit down with leaders in the business, legal, and policy communities here in Washington. Today, I'm very happy to have with us two key members of the McCormick Group leadership team. It's Steve Nelson and Dave Riss. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be here.
Yeah,
happy to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. Great to be here. Thank you.
Great. And we got the live shot here at the Capitol. And let me first sort of introduce both of you because, I had a chance to get to know both of you over the years, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, first, Steve, you're a key member of the leadership team. You really focus on the law practice and government practice. Recently, have taken on the role, I understand, of marketing director as well. But your main thing is, from what I understand, you really work with a wide range of professionals here in Washington, and a lot of people have come to rely on your assistance and your counsel. You also, as an attorney, were with Aaron Fox, I understand, previously, and had a career in journalism. You were with the Legal Times.
Correct.
And note that I did not realize this in the times that we have talked together, that for the past 14 years, you've been performing stand-up comedy at local venues here in Washington, as well as around the country, like the Comedy Store in LA.
Right.
So it's interesting what you can learn about people when you invite them on a program like this.
That's great. Thank you.
And David, first I'll say that I understand you're a principal at McCormick, but also you have your own podcast.
Correct.
Had a chance to listen to Talent Transitions the other day, and I loved what one of your guests said. She goes, I've had a long and winding career. So I immediately started thinking about the Beatles and thinking about how many of us have had a long and winding career here in Washington. But in terms of your role with the law and government affairs practice, your searches for members of consulting firm teams, lobbying firms, trade associations, representing candidates for those positions, with a specialty, I guess, with government officials and former government officials like myself. I guess you've placed many candidates from senior places in Congress and the executive branch. So, I mean, this is a real pleasure to talk to both of you, and people's careers obviously are very special to them, like their own family members are. And so I think that today's discussion should be of particular interest to folks here in the Washington area. Steve, let's just start with who is the McCormick Group? I mean, I know you're one of the largest executive search firms, but you also perform services, you and your colleagues, that go beyond what we see as traditional executive search. If you could just sort of talk to us and the viewers a little bit about what makes the McCormick Group who you are and what makes you different from your competitors.
Right. I think that when it comes to federal Washington, the business that happens here with regards to government, I think we're the leading search firm in terms of, different practice groups. Our government contracting group obviously deals with the government agencies. Obviously, our law and government affairs group is involved, our association management group as well. So when it comes to federal Washington, I think we're the leading firm. I'll add one thing about the consulting. We're doing more and more consulting with law firms and other policy groups, really helping them with their organizational development and their recruiting strategy as a whole.
Interesting. And we had talked a little bit earlier about helping them with their business plans, and really helping them be stand out and more profitable, going beyond sort of the traditional executive search function.
And that's something we work a lot with the candidate side on, is working on their business plans, particularly people coming out of government. They're coming out of government maybe for the first time, and they have to go into a law firm or perhaps a lobbying firm, and they need to be able to craft a business plan that tells the law firm, what they're going to do and why they're going to be successful.
Dave, I know that the McCormick Group's really been instrumental in the greater Washington area in so many ways, in business and legal communities. Tell us about some of the groups that you've partnered with over the years.
Yeah, I think, Jack, let's focus a little bit on how it's changed, which is, and when I take on a new search assignment, and this has happened over the last few years, where the first groups that I'm reaching out to are the diversity affinity groups like the Washington Government Relations Group, which is the African American affinity group for lobbyists, Women in Government Relations. they are among, and there's others, but those are the groups that I'm reaching out to first to make sure that they are aware of the opportunities that we're working on, and that that they should be sharing that with their members.
And virtually every client that we talk to about a search or about an assignment, they are very interested in diversity candidates. And we know that that's one good way to make sure that we're casting a wide net.
Yeah, it used to be when we would talk to a client about the list of attributes that they were looking for in candidates, they'd give us their list of 10, and at the end of it, they would say, yeah, we're interested in diversity candidates also. Now diversity is like number 1 or number 2 on the list. So that's a real shift that we've seen in the last 2 years.
And tell me, Steve, tell me about some of the dynamics that you're seeing with the sort of the law firms and multi-client lobbying groups that you all have worked with in the past year.
Right. Well, I think that the one thing which has happened over a longer period of time, I would say 10 to 20 years, is that the law firms, 20 years ago, they were not really, most of them were not really involved in government relations. They looked at that as something for pure lobbyists. That has totally changed. And now law firms look at government relations very broadly, including their regulatory practices, and often merge them into one government relations group that covers everything. Covers the Hill, covers the agencies, it even covers things like economic development.
So Dave, we're a year and a half into the Biden administration. There are cyclical natures of administrations. Here we are right now. There's a certain churn. If you could just talk about that, maybe some similarities and differences with the previous administration.
Yeah, so Jack, that's a great question. In every administration, people go into government service for about 2 years. That's their plan. And so we begin to hear from them at about this time. And it's very consistent towards the end of the Trump administration. My phone started to ring about 6 months before the end. My phone's starting to ring now. I'm hearing from folks every day. They're beginning to think about what's next for them after their government service. There's really no difference in going from any one administration to the next. It's that 2-year cycle is very consistent. And the demand for Democrats is very strong. In spite of the challenges that most administrations have in the midterms, most Democrats are still very much in demand. And from a lobby shop perspective, many of them are out of balance. They recognize they're out of balance, and they're going to fix that, ongoing, even if there is a change in control in November.
Steve, would you like to add to that?
Well, yes, I would like to, just say that there will be more demand for Republicans throughout this year and into next year. That's for sure. But as Dave said, it will be a mix, and that basically these days there's a lot getting done on the Hill. It's something we're not really hearing about, in the mainstream media, where it's all about dysfunction and partisanship, or partisan politics. But in reality, there's a lot of business getting done on the Hill, particularly in the healthcare space, which is going to get done, and which is keeping these lobbying firms busy, very busy. And as you can see by the reports that are coming out in the media, it's never been a better time to be a lobbyist than right now.
No question.
It's such a good point about bipartisanship, because if one only were to listen to the media and to reports about and things are contentious, and we know they are, and social media has made it more so, but people don't focus enough on what does get done, and very important industries counting on key professionals to help that happen. And I think about healthcare, and having come from HHS myself, you look at this year, you've got the entire pharmaceutical industry plus the entire med tech, medical device industry, having just agreed to a whole series of fees as well as performance standards at the FDA that will facilitate the approval of a whole range of drugs and devices, and this will likely pass. So even within this highly charged environment that people are always talking about, big things still can get done. Let's talk about the COVID Great Resignation and this dynamic which we've all seen, whether it's with our own companies, our families and friends, and also this recent poll that I just saw yesterday about a pretty decent percentage of people who are now regretting, their decision to have moved on. Any thoughts from the two of you as executive recruiters?
Right. Well, it's definitely, that was the big topic within our firm over last year was the incredible market it was across the board in different industries, at different levels within companies. Amount of movement, the fact that compensation went up probably 20% from June of 2021 through to December of 2021.
Incredible.
And so there was a lot of movement. There were a lot of counter offers that people would take. They were playing the system a little bit. So on the latter point about the great regret, I think there's a couple things. First is that when you move for the money.
I note that we are coining that phrase here today, the great regret. It was the great resignation, now maybe the great regret.
But I would say that, I think when people move primarily for compensation, that may come back to bite them because, careers are much more complicated, and everybody wants to be able to do the kind of work they want, and they want the flexibility to do that work and have their family responsibilities as well. And sometimes that got out of kilter because people were making rash decisions and decisions mostly about compensation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Dave?
I know more than a few folks who moved their families completely, decided to go into completely different geographies, and have now determined that it's pretty tough to do government relations from from the hinterlands. You have to be in Washington, and so now they're coming back.
I note some of my friends who might have gone south, and I was wondering about that, even though many of us would like to be in places like Florida right now.
I do want to add one thing about this current situation because I think it's important. It's going to be important going forward. Flexibility in your work style is critical right now, and it depends on the position, depends on what your functions are, and so forth. But the firms and the companies and the organizations that are flexible and realize that it is based on the work that needs to be done and your responsibilities and what your function is, and develops it that way rather than having a company-wide or firm-wide policy, those firms will do better holding on to people because people, they'll accept it if it makes rational sense. But sometimes what we're hearing is that, some firms and companies are just, they have these blanket policies and it doesn't make sense. Law firms in particular, the partners are not by and large going into the office that much. So if you have associates who aren't getting the advantage of interacting with the partners, they're not getting anything out of it. So it's a complicated situation, and it's very tough right now to be an HR
complicated.
executive.
People have expectations and demands, and yet there's fairness issues about how does management handle this so that they're not just making separate one-off deals with everyone.
Exactly.
And lots of complaints. That's complicated. Well, let's. This has been wonderful. We've talked about a lot of trends and some specific situations, but let's get really specific as we sort of end here and talk about any placements that you really want to highlight, because you all put a lot of great people into a lot of interesting positions, and just want to ask you about some of those that both of you have succeeded on the last 6 months.
Right. Okay, so I'll start. We worked with a large education and workforce development company to find them a senior director of government relations in Washington. And it was the first person at this level that they were bringing in. And it was was great working with them because they're at the cutting edge of what's going on workforce skills and training. And it was a terrific experience working with that company.
That's fantastic. And earlier today, we had a group in here that's been very active in construction industry workforce development, which is an area that I feel very strongly about, having been associated with a group that really helps kids get into areas of business that they had no idea that they were going to get involved with through the mentoring of a range of industry leaders. How about yourself, Dave?
Well, a couple of big projects on the in-house side. We worked with a company that does patient transport on a global basis, and they decided they needed a new senior VP of government relations, and so we were able to attract a phenomenal and diversity candidate for them, and also placed someone out of the food industry into one of the major law firms in town that's also very successful government relations practice, but found someone with a specialty in food policy in industry, and was able to place him in a law firm.
And then one other thing that comes to mind is we worked with one of the major public policy shops in town, not a law firm, to fill a couple of their senior administrative roles. So it's not just the lobbyists that we place, it's not just the lawyers we place, but we place top-level professionals that are often as important to those companies and their success as any, sort of lobbyist or lawyer.
And is that more of a lobbying firm where they are playing that kind of role, or is it a think tank?
It's a lobbying firm.
Lobbying
it's
firm.
One of the top 10 firms on the Hill report of the leading lobbying firms. And we do that with law firms around the country as well.
Nice. Well, this has been really great. I really want to thank both of you. This has been, we've talked about trends, we've talked about specifics, learned more about McCormick Group and the two of you. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Jack, thank you.
Appreciate it.